The wind whispers across an endless prehistoric plain, nothing but dust and scattered stones. And something else, something darker. The camera slowly draws closer, revealing what lies half buried in the ancient earth. Human bones, yellowed by millennia, yet still bearing witness to a horrifying truth. These aren't just any bones. Deep gouges scar the surface, precise cuts that slice through bone and marrow, tool marks that tell a story no textbook dares to write in full detail. Was this a feast, or was this murder? The silence breaks as we confront an uncomfortable reality. These marks weren't made by wild animals. No lion's claw carved these patterns. No hyena's teeth left these deliberate scratches. These cuts were made by human hands, by human tools, by people who looked into the eyes of their own kind and saw dinner. The bones lie scattered like broken promises of our humanity. Each fragment whispers the same chilling question. What happened here? What drove our ancestors to cross the ultimate taboo? As the wind picks up, stirring the dust around these ancient remains, we begin to understand that this isn't just archaeology. This isn't just history. This is the story of when humans became both predator and prey. When survival meant abandoning everything we thought made us human. When the line between civilization and savagery was drawn in blood. Welcome to the darkest chapter of our species' past. A time when cannibalism wasn't just possible, it was necessary. The bones have kept their secrets for over 1 million years, but today they're finally ready to speak. 1.5 million years ago, the world was dying. Ice sheets crept across continents like frozen fingers, squeezing the life from vast territories. The climate was harsh, unforgiving, brutal. Our ancestors huddled in caves, struggling against a planet that seemed determined to erase them entirely. Food was scarce, desperately scarce. Imagine waking each day not knowing if you'll eat, not knowing if the next sunrise will be your last. Every calorie was precious. Every meal could be the difference between life and death. In this merciless world, something unthinkable began to happen. Deep in the caves of Grandolina, Spain, archaeologists made a discovery that shattered our understanding of early humanity, human bones, hundreds of them. But these weren't respectful burials or accidental deaths. These bones told a story of deliberate butchery. The evidence is undeniable. Cut marks slice across femurs with surgical precision, skulls cracked open with calculated force, long bones split lengthwise to extract every drop of marrow. These weren't the chaotic marks of scavenging animals. This was systematic, methodical, human. Homo antecessor, our ancestors, had turned their stone tools on their own kind. They stripped flesh from bone with the same care they used on deer and bison. They broke open skulls to feast on brains. They sucked marrow from the bones of their neighbors. The evidence doesn't lie. At Grandolina, at least 11 individuals were butchered and consumed. Men, women, children, none were spared. But this wasn't an isolated incident. Across Europe, across Africa, the story repeats. At Bodo in Ethiopia, at Sterkfontein in South Africa, at Krapina in Croatia. Everywhere our ancestors lived, they left behind the same horrifying calling card. The bones of their own species marked with the unmistakable signs of cannibalism. The first killers weren't monsters. They were us. The question haunts every archaeologist who studies these ancient bones. Why? Was this simply hunger? Desperate people in desperate times doing whatever it took to survive another day? Or was something darker at work? Something that suggests cannibalism was more than mere survival? The evidence whispers conflicting stories. At some sites, the butchery appears frantic, almost random. Bones bear the marks of hasty cutting, as if people were starving and couldn't afford precision. Here, cannibalism feels like a last resort, a horrifying but understandable response to famine. But at other sites, the patterns are different, disturbing different. Skulls are opened with surgical precision as if accessing the brain was a ritual act. Bones are defleshed with care, almost reverence. The remains are sometimes buried in specific arrangements, suggesting ceremony rather than disposal. At the cave site of Fontbrégois in France, researchers found something that chills the blood. Human bones mingled with those of animals, but processed differently. The animal bones were cracked and scattered carelessly. The human bones were treated with deliberate attention. This wasn't random cannibalism. This was something planned, something meaningful. Were our ancestors consuming their dead to honor them, to absorb their strength, to prevent their spirits from wandering? Or were they eliminating enemies, quite literally consuming their opposition? The skull fragments tell perhaps the most disturbing story. At multiple sites, researchers find evidence of what they call mortuary cannibalism. Brains were extracted not just for nutrition, but as part of what appears to be funeral practices. Imagine the scene: firelight dancing on cave walls as early humans gathered around the body of a fallen member. Tools glinting as they carefully, reverently opened the skull. The soft tissue consumed not out of hunger, but out of belief. But belief in what? Perhaps they thought consuming the dead would transfer knowledge, strength, or courage to the living. Perhaps it was their way of ensuring the deceased remained part of the tribe forever. Or perhaps it was simply easier than digging graves in frozen ground. The bones can't tell us their thoughts. They can only show us the cuts, the breaks, the systematic dismemberment of people who once lived, loved, and died believing they were human, just like us. Listen closely and you can almost hear it. The sharp crack of stone against stone echoing through ancient caves as our ancestors crafted their tools. Crack, crack, crack. Each strike peels away a razor-sharp flake of obsidian or flint. Each fragment becomes a blade capable of slicing through skin, muscle, and bone with surgical precision. These weren't crude implements. Archaeological analysis reveals tools designed with specific purposes in mind. Small, delicate blades for precise work around joints, larger cleavers for splitting bones, scrapers for removing every scrap of flesh. Under microscopic analysis, the truth becomes inescapable. The cut marks on human bones match exactly the patterns left on animal remains. The same tools, the same techniques, the same methodical efficiency. Dr. Tim White, one of the world's leading experts on prehistoric cannibalism, can tell you exactly what happened in these caves. The bodies were processed like any other meat source. First, the soft tissues were removed. Then the bones were broken to access the marrow. Finally, even the skulls were cracked open to extract the brain. Nothing was wasted. Imagine the scene. Flickering firelight casting dancing shadows on cave walls. The sound of stone cutting through flesh. The crack of bones being split. The soft scraping of tools against bone as every morsel of nutrition was carefully harvested. The precision is what makes it so disturbing. This wasn't frenzied violence. This was practiced skill. These people knew exactly what they were doing. They had done it before. The tools themselves tell a story of evolution. Over time, the blades become sharper, more specialized. The techniques more refined. Our ancestors weren't just occasional cannibals. They were getting better at it. Modern forensic analysis can even tell us about the butcher's handedness. The angle of cuts, the direction of tool marks, the pressure applied, all of it preserved in bone for millions of years. We can reconstruct not just what happened, but how it happened. Who held the knife? Which hand struck the blow? These tools, sharp as obsidian and cold as death, were the instruments of humanity's darkest survival. In the hands of our ancestors, they became both salvation and damnation. The blades have long since crumbled to dust, but their work remains carved forever into the bones of the consumed. The roles were about to reverse. Deep in the shadowy recesses of Atapuerca's caves, archaeologists uncovered something that changed everything. These cannibals, these systematic butchers of their own kind, had themselves become prey. The evidence tells a story of swift, brutal revenge. Picture this: a group of early humans, perhaps the same ones who had feasted on their neighbors, now huddled in terror as footsteps echoed through their cave. The hunters had become the hunted. The predators had become prey. The bones scattered across the cave floor paint a vivid picture of their final moments. Skulls crushed by heavy stones, ribs shattered by powerful blows, bodies dismembered with the same cold efficiency they had once used on others. But this wasn't random violence. This was calculated retribution. The attack patterns suggest ambush, coordination, planning. Other groups of early humans had discovered what these cannibals were doing, and they had come for justice. Or perhaps it was simply competition. In a world where every scrap of food meant survival, cannibalistic groups posed a unique threat. They had already proven they would kill and eat other humans. Who would be next? The cycle of violence was complete. Kill or be killed. Eat or be eaten. But the most chilling discovery came from deeper analysis of the remains. These weren't quick, merciful deaths. The butchery marks on the cannibal bones show the same systematic precision they had used on their own victims. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, flesh for flesh. The attackers hadn't just killed their cannibal enemies, they had consumed them too. The circle of cannibalism had closed. The practice had spread. What began as survival had become tradition. What started as desperation had evolved into a way of life. In caves across prehistoric Europe, the story repeats. Groups of early humans living in constant fear, not just of wild animals or climate change, but of each other. Neighbors who might smile by day and sharpen their knives by night. Trust became a luxury no one could afford. Cooperation became suspect. The very thing that should have made early humans stronger, their ability to work together, had become their greatest vulnerability. The hunters were now the hunted. The cannibals had become the consumed. And somewhere in that endless cycle of violence, something fundamental about human nature was being written in blood and bone. As we stand before these ancient bones, scattered across laboratory tables like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle we're afraid to complete, we must confront the ultimate question. What does this tell us about ourselves? The evidence is undeniable. Our ancestors practiced cannibalism, not occasionally, not reluctantly, but systematically across continents, across millennia. It was woven into the very fabric of early human existence. But here's what should truly disturb us. It may have made us who we are today. Cannibalism, researchers now believe, may have been one of the evolutionary pressures that shaped human development. Groups that practiced it may have gained crucial nutritional advantages during times of scarcity. The protein from human flesh, the fats from brain tissue, the minerals from bone marrow, all of it may have helped our ancestors survive when others perished. But the costs were enormous. Disease spread rapidly through cannibal populations. Prion diseases, similar to mad cow disease, likely devastated communities that consumed human brain tissue. The practice that kept some alive may have killed many others. Yet perhaps the most profound impact was psychological. Cannibalism created an us versus them mentality that may have been crucial to human social development. By defining certain people as food rather than family, early humans learned to create strong, in-group bonds while excluding outsiders. This ability to distinguish between human and other, even when both were biologically identical, may have been the foundation of human civilization. It's the same mental process that allows us to form tribes, nations, and societies. But it's also the same process that enables genocide, slavery, and war. Standing here looking at these bones, we see ourselves reflected in their ancient surfaces, the capacity for both cooperation and cannibalism, the ability to care deeply for some while treating others as less than human. These aren't just archaeological specimens, they're mirrors. The tools that carved these bones have evolved into modern weapons. The caves where cannibals once fed have become battlefields where we still consume each other, just less literally. The tribal thinking that once determined who lived and who became dinner still shapes our politics, our prejudices, our fears. Perhaps the most unsettling truth is this. The darkness we see in these prehistoric caves isn't safely locked in the past. It's not something we evolved beyond or left behind in our primitive years. It's still here, still within us, hidden beneath a thin veneer of civilization, waiting. The bones in the dust have finally spoken. Their message is clear. We are all descendants of cannibals. The question isn't whether we're capable of such darkness. The question is, what's stopping us now? The wind picks up, stirring the ancient dust one final time, as if the ghosts of our ancestors are whispering their last warning to the living.